broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar titled Traveling Abroad with Advance Parole. We are very excited to share some of our knowledge about how beneficiaries of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program can successfully travel abroad. This webinar is brought to you by Educators for Fair Consideration in collaboration with our trusted partner, Curran Berger, LLP. Today, we have two panelists joining me. We have with us Dan Berger, partner with Curran Berger LLP, who is a frequent speaker at colleges, universities, and nonprofits on immigration issues. As a law student, he won the 1995 American Immigration Lawyers Association annual writing competition for an article on INS policies toward international adoptions. Mr. Berger continued researching and writing, including being a senior editor of the AILA Immigration and Nationality Law Handbook for over 10 years, editor-in-chief of Immigration Options for Academics and Researchers 2005, and now the new edition 2011, and editor of the International Adoption Sourcebook and Diplomatic Visas Handbook. He currently is vice chair of the AILA Healthcare Committee and a member of the AILA Texas Service Center Liaison Committee and the Rome District Chapter Consular Liaison Group. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Krishna.
We also have Ju Hong joining us live from South Korea, very exciting, where he recently landed after successfully obtaining an advance parole document. Longtime friend of Educators for Fair Consideration and a current research assistant at Harvard University, Ju came to the United States from South Korea at the age of 11 and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. He attended Laney College in Oakland, where he was elected as the first Asian American and youngest student body president. Ju graduated from Laney College and transferred to University of California, Berkeley, where he became the first undocumented student government senator in UC Berkeley's history. Last year, in 2013, Ju challenged President Barack Obama face-to-face on the record number of deportations during his speech at the Betty Ong Center in San Francisco. His courageous action has appeared on national and international media, including CNN, New York Times, NPR, and BBC News. Welcome, Ju Hong.
Hello from South Korea. Woo-hoo.
And we are very excited to have both of them here, and you'll hear more about Ju Hong's experience later on in the presentation. Before we get started, just a few logistical things about this webinar. So this webinar is actually based on one of our recent guides titled Traveling Abroad with Advance Parole, a guide for deferred action for childhood arrivals beneficiaries. So we also collaborated with Curran Berger to create this guide. And so this guide covers everything that we'll go over today, plus more. And you can download the guide for free at our website, www.e4fc.org. For this webinar, we are also recording it, and it will also be uploaded on our website. So check back in a few weeks for that. Lastly, although all attendees are currently on mute, you may type in questions throughout the webinar on your panel. If you see the tab that says questions, you can go ahead and type them throughout the webinar, and we are going to have a section at the end of our presentation to answer as many questions as we can. So feel free to ask questions to any of our panelists. So let's get started. To the main event, to the presentation. So an overview of what we will be covering today. So first, we will have Ju Hong speaking live from South Korea just to share his experience about successfully traveling abroad after requesting an advance parole document. So we'll hear from him. We'll also, of course, you discuss what advance parole is and provide examples of purposes for traveling abroad with advance parole. We'll go over we'll give an overview of the application process, as well as provide examples of evidence that you could submit along with the advance parole request. And we'll also answer frequently asked questions. We have already been receiving a lot of questions about advance parole, both from people who want to travel or folks who know someone with DACA who wants to travel. So we will go over some of those common questions, and we'll provide tips and advice for everyone to keep in mind before going abroad. And lastly, like I said, we'll have a Q&A session based on the questions that attendees input on the panel. So with that said, about our organization, so about Educators for Fair Consideration. So E4FC empowers undocumented young people to pursue their dreams of college, career, and citizenship in the United States. Through a holistic approach, we offer a range of services to undocumented young people. Specifically, we offer legal services, which I will go into some detail in a bit. We also provide outreach presentations to a wide range of community members throughout the country. We provide financial support through scholarships and grants. We also do advocacy for broader policies to expand the rights and benefits of all undocumented people. And we are also known for our educational materials, so definitely check out our website if you haven't done so already. So I really wanted to put focus on what's called the Dreamer Intake Service. So the Intake Service is part of our legal services. And this service provides a free online assessment of immigration remedies and policies, including information about advance parole requests. Since we began the service in 2009, we have helped more than 1,300 undocumented young people throughout the country. So to use this service, folks could go to our website or can go to the tinyurl.com/E4FC legal on the PowerPoint slide to access the service. And like I said, it's open nationwide. Then just a quick overview of some of our resources. Like I said, we are also known for a lot of guides and publications that we post on our website for both undocumented young people and their allies. So one of them I already mentioned, Traveling Abroad with Advance Parole. Again, this webinar is based on that guide, so it goes more in depth, and definitely check that out on our website. We also have a lot of DACA materials. We have a toolkit for educators who are interested in supporting their undocumented students and applying for deferred action for childhood arrivals. We have a guide for dreamers who are wanting to apply for DACA on their own. We also have a guide for DACA beneficiaries to understand their resources, their benefits and rights now that they have DACA. And lastly, one of our popular materials right now is also just steps to prepare for your DACA renewal, since I know a lot of folks who have DACA are now coming up on their expiration date. So check that out, and that will be updated shortly since the DACA renewal guidelines are expected to come out soon. So without further ado, we have Ju Hong, who is joining us live from South Korea. How are you, Ju Hong?
I'm doing well. Just wanted to make it clear the fact that I am in South Korea, although this room looks like anywhere in the US or somewhere else, but I am in South Korea just to make sure. I was thinking of putting some Korean flag on the back or, doing some webinars outside, but I just figured I need some quiet place. But I am in South Korea just to make a quick proof. So this is a yogurt that's made in Korea, so I am in South Korea. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ju.
Thank you. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. It's really great to have you share your experience from abroad. I mean, it's so powerful that you're even able to take a moment to be with other people and to kind of just share your experience. So, I guess my first question for you is just how it feels. How does it feel to be in South Korea for the first time in over 13 years since you came to the US?
Yeah, I mean it's been very overwhelming. At the same time, I'm so blessed and grateful to be in South Korea, and I feel like I'm home. I have my grandmother in South Korea. I have my relatives, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my niece, my friends from elementary schools, and so I feel like I'm home, and it's been great so far. I mean, as soon as I landed, I was greeted by my relatives, and I stayed at my cousin's house, and we ate dinner, and we just talked about different things, and a lot of conversation was just comparing between the U.S. and South Korea, food, culture, and clothes, and a little bit of everything. And on Friday, I met my grandmother for the first time in over 13 years, and it was very emotional experience for me because I have not seen my grandmother for a very very long time, and it was in a way very painful because she got a lot skinnier and she does not really recognize me because she has Alzheimer's disease. So when I pull out my picture when I was young and her, she recognized me, and but for briefly, and like 10 seconds later, she asked the same question and she doesn't really recognize me and things like that. But at the end of the day, I'm just very happy and grateful the fact that I I saw her, and I know that I'm gonna continue to see her and spend time with her in the next 15 days. And after that, I toured around capital city Seoul, South Korea, and I spent time with my cousin. And that night, and on Saturday, I went on a solo trip and visit universities and college town. And on Sunday, I went to church that I know, and I did also tour a little bit. And Monday, I held a press conference in South Korea to share my personal story and discuss about undocumented immigration issues that are affecting both countries, the United States and South Korea. And we had great presence of a media outlet covered our story, and I hope that that would reach out to broader community in South Korea to better understand about immigration issues, and I hope that they will take stands on supporting immigrant community. And I thought that it was very timely manner because in South Korea, as election is coming up, is June 4th next week. So I hope that politicians in South Korea would do something to help undocumented foreign workers in South Korea and collaborate with the U.S. government to help immigrant community in the U.S. And yesterday, I visited my kindergarten and elementary school for the first time in many, many years. And, I remember a lot of memories, and, the school, everything looks the same. I mean, I know that there's a lot of things have changed, but also there's a lot of things remain the same. So it was very incredible moment. And when I went to my elementary school, I actually visited principal's office to check out the yearbook so that I could find my old school friends, so that maybe I could meet them before I leave to the U.S. So I wrote down my friend's name, and I've been researching around in social media and just through online, and I found a couple of them, and I think that we are going to meet this upcoming Saturday to have reunion and just have a good time and just eat and hang out and things like that. And so I'm very excited, and I have about 15 more days left to stay in South Korea and go back. Right now, to be honest, I feel like things are going very slow, but I know that at the end of the day, I know that I will regret what I have said because I don't know when I will come back to South Korea. So I'm trying to live this moment, fully present, and enjoy my time in South Korea, spend time with my family, spend time with my friends, and travel around and discover my own identity. And hopefully, and also given this special opportunity, I hope to do some sort of campaign to educate other people around this immigration issues. So I have a lot of packed agenda and ambitious goals that I have in mind. So I'm trying to do everything that I can in 15 days. But as of right now, I'm very grateful and blessed, and I'm trying to enjoy every single moment.
Great. I'm glad you're taking advantage of your trip. And again, thank you for doing much more than just traveling, but also just educating the community and sharing your experience. Um, I guess specifically about the advance parole process, I'm wondering from your perspective, obviously in a little bit we'll hear from Dan, who's an immigration attorney who has um, worked with a lot of undocumented students in applying. But I guess from your perspective, from someone who applied, I'm wondering if you can summarize just the process in applying for advance parole.
Absolutely. I mean, I knew about advance parole when I got my DACA in 2012, but I didn't really wanted to apply for advance parole because I didn't have no specific reason. But l late 2013, I learned that my grandmother is very sick and she's undergoing treatment in hospital in South Korea. And she's turning 90 years old this year, and I really wanted to see her before her condition get worse. Um, that's when I decided to apply for advanced parole in 2014 in January. So I gathered all my documentation um, from South Korea, more specifically, my grandmother medical examination and doctor's notes and other necessary documents. And instead of mailing it out to my house, my relatives scanned all those documentation and emailed it to me, so it was a lot easier and without any cost. And I did that, and I did a lot of research actually beforehand. Kind of track back, I did a lot of research beforehand, whether if I really wanted to apply for advanced parole. Um, and when I made the decision that I will apply for advanced parole, I got more advice from my peers, my mentors, and lawyers that I know, um, to get some different suggestions and recommendations. And when I and then after that, I actually found a legal representation from Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco as a nonprofit organization. Um, and I got the legal representation, and the lawyer who worked with me, look over my application and guide me throughout the process. And Advance Pro itself was very simple and straightforward, um, but the the process itself was difficult because the documentation process, gathering documentation and renewing my passport and other things that I need to take care of was took me a very long time. But I think I was able to manage everything within less than 2 months, and turn it in, and I got very quick response, and now I'm here.
Cool. So, can you, as far as so I understand it took some time to gather the documentation and actually submit the request, but after that, you said it was a quick turnaround time for you to
Right.
receive your decision. So, how long did you have to wait to receive a decision on your advance parole request, and how long were you approved to be outside of the country for?
Absolutely. So it took me about 20 days, and I was actually wanting to hear back from them as soon as possible. So what I was doing at the last day, was, actually I contacted USCIS directly to see my current status was, and I was asking to see if I could get my status on the day of that I called. And if they say if they're still awaiting the process, I was planning to call my representative in my district, and ask them to pressure or contact the USCIS to approve my case as soon as possible because my timeline was very tight. So I was planning to do that, but on the day of when I called them, that's when they actually approved my case. So I clearly remember exact date. I think it was exactly 25 days, and I was really blessed because sometimes it takes longer than 25 days. As far as I understand, you have to wait, or you'll hear back from them up to 90 days. But for me, it took me less than a month, so I was very fortunate to hear back from them. Very quick turnaround, and I requested for about 20 days, but they gave me some extra room before I leave and when I come back. So I think they gave me about 2 or 3 more extra room in case anything happens or whatnot. But so yeah, um, I left on Wednesday, May 22nd, and I will be back to the U.S. Uh, on June 10th on Tuesday. But then again, that was the thing that I requested, but USCIS gave me 2 or 3 more days the leg room.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so my next question is, so I understand South Korea has a mandatory military service requirement for all males. So how did you even bypass that requirement, so that you were able to renew your passport, or so to make sure that you didn't have any trouble when you landed in South Korea?
Right, there was another tedious process for me while I was applying for advance parole. Even if I got approved advance parole, I need a valid passport to go outside of the country and come back. And my Korean passport at the time was expired, and I need to renew my passport. So I went to visit Korean embassy to renew my passport, but the staff told me that I need to defer my military service in South Korea in order to renew my passport. So I had to do extra step in order to renew my passport. So they gave me extra or additional form that I need to fill out. And so I did, which took me about another day or two. Then I turned it in, submitted it to the Korean embassy, and the Korean embassy send it over to Korean government, and Korean government will approve it or reject it. And so I have to wait for that process for a week or two. And fortunately, Korean government approved my case, and they're willing to allow me to defer my military service based on my reasoning of you know completing my education in grad school at San Francisco State University. And so they did that, and they gave the document over to Korean embassy, and Korean embassy contacted me, and I went back to the Korean embassy, and I did just a normal process of renewing my passport. So for that entire process also took me about around like 25 to 30 days. So I highly recommend um, uh, especially South Korean and undocumented immigrant folks who want to apply for advance parole should, plan ahead would be a best bet. Otherwise, it would be very stressful type of process.
Cool, great. And as far as the costs, so it's very costly to, you know, I mean, not just the paying the advance parole request, but to travel. Buy the flight tickets, food, all of that. So I'm wondering what you did in order to save up for that, or did you receive any help with any of those costs?
Absolutely. I know that it's going to be very difficult for me to travel outside of the country, visit my family, considering traveling expense, food expense, lodging expense, and other necessary expense that I need to prepare and plan to go to South Korea. So what I did was ask for community support And what I did was I did just a online fundraising campaign, and I sent out private letters through email asking for just a little bit of contribution towards my journey to South Korea. And you know, less than 2 weeks, I fulfilled my fundraising goal with enormous amounts of support from different communities. I'm talking about my close friends to people that I don't even know, and people from high school to college, instructors, nonprofit organizations to private organizations. They chip in different ways financially, but also community help me um, uh, different ways. Obviously, financial has been very tremendous amounts of support, but they also supported me through legal representation, and they helped me through, just mentally and emotionally. They helped me prepare to make sure that, I will not face any type of consequences um, before, during, or after I come back to the U.S. So I feel so grateful and so privileged to be in such a position where I'm so much surrounded by, loving people, organizations who believe in me and willing to support me every step of the way. And that is why I feel like, this is not just about me. And so I felt that, I wanted to do something to give back by creating my personal website to share my personal experience and talk more about Advance Parole and DACA, and coming to this type of webinar to share my personal experience and help other people who are interested in applying for Advance Parole, DACA, or any type of immigration issues. And and being part of this journey is such a unique experience. So I know that what I have done was I am documenting my journey to South Korea through film, and this is going to be incredible opportunity for me with my family and my community. And so I think that it's been great so far, and I can't wait to share my experience to people, and hopefully I will inspire other people to take action around immigration.
Great, yeah, definitely looking forward to that, the films and the short documentary that you're creating. So I guess my last question is, would you encourage others to travel abroad with advance parole, and do you have any suggestions for them?
I think I think part of me is, I think my goal is to make sure that I share my personal experience, and they will um, you know read over it or watch over it, whatever they do, and they'll make a better informed decision. I don't want to, pressure them to do this or do that. But I think that is a great opportunity. But that is why I think it's great for me to kind of share my personal story, and to see if they want to do it or not. That is why I created my personal website. That is why, my friend and director Anna and I are documenting my journey to South Korea. So they'll have a better understanding of advanced parole, then I think they will make a better decision to whether apply for advanced parole or not. But if they do, I highly recommend them to plan ahead. Um, it's very important to plan ahead and talk to as many people as possible, especially people who have gone through the process. Um, and I also recommend them to get legal representation. Um, you know, hire a lawyer or seek advice from a nonprofit organization who work around immigration. And I think the legal representation is very critical. And I think there was big chunk of my process when applying for advanced parole. But fortunately, I had a lot of support in different communities, so I had no problem just finding one or two lawyers. So I think that it would be great for you if you're interested. I think it's a great opportunity for coming to the webinar. And I know that, E4FC provides great service, and you could talk to Krishna and Dania and other E4FC staff members, and they're willing to support you in different ways. And you could also contact me directly, so I'm also willing to help you if you're interested in applying for advanced parole, or at least hear more about my personal experience. So feel free to reach out to me at any given period of time.
Great. Thank you so much, Ju Hong. So again, Ju Hong is joining us live from South Korea. He was recently approved for his advance parole document, and so he will be coming back in a few weeks. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, this webinar is actually based on the guide that we created recently, also titled Traveling Abroad with Advance Parole. So in there, we go more in depth, asking a lot of people questions who have been successfully able to travel abroad or in the process of doing so. So we have a lot more testimonials in that guide, and you can download that guide again at e4fc.org. So thank you so much, Ju.
Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, so now to the main portion of the presentation. I see that a few people are already asking, well, what's the process like? How can I actually apply for Advance Parole? So this is where we have Dan, our expert attorney. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. All right. Well, and thank you, Ju. I do want to say that I had an opportunity to do one of these advanced parole webinars about a week ago for immigration attorneys, and we had a lot of hypotheticals, but it really makes this so much more personal to have Ju speaking from South Korea and to hear his story. I think the first question on the slide is, what is advanced parole? It's kind of a funny name if you're not used to working with immigration, but parole is the right to enter the United States without a visa, and advanced parole means having that approved before you leave the United States. So if you have a DACA approval, you can apply to travel abroad. You can apply for that document while you're in the United States. That document will be called advanced parole, and if approved, then it does allow you to leave the United States and come back, and it is approved for certain humanitarian, educational, or work purposes. So, next slide, please. Okay, and as with most questions about DACA, one of the best places to look for information is right on the USCIS website. They really have done a very good job at trying to help explain the rules, and also to get the FAQs are excellent. And here, these examples come from the FAQs, are examples of the different kinds of reasons why advanced parole can be granted. Humanitarian examples like Ju and his grandmother, medical assistance, funeral services, educational examples, and employment purposes. And unfortunately, if the case does not fit into one of these categories, I suppose it's possible to still apply, but I think the chance of success is weaker unless you happen to be lucky and have them accept this by analogy. But these are really the reasons why you can apply for advanced parole. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so how do you do it? The form is on the internet at uscis.gov. You can even Google I-131, which is the form number. So you'll download and complete an I-131. It is a multi-purpose form. It's used for all sorts of travel documents, not just DACA. So just take a deep breath and skip the parts on reentry permits and other refugee travel documents and other parts that don't apply to you. Be sure to include evidence for the reason of your travel. That's very important, and Ju explained getting that kind of evidence. Do include a copy of your DACA approval notice, copy of a photo identification card or passport, just a photo ID to prove who you are, and then the application fee, of course. Next slide, please. Okay, and in terms of evidence that can be used, again, it is a good idea to look at the FAQs because they do provide some good evidence. In general, for the humanitarian examples, a letter from a physician is good. Family members, serious illness. We have had people use obituaries or death certificates. And then also be sure to connect the dots. Just showing that somebody is sick is not enough unless you show that that person is related to you. And birth certificates, marriage certificates, and so forth can help make that connection. For educational examples, a letter from a school employee is really excellent, just explaining how the program abroad relates to your educational program. And also a document showing enrollment or explaining what the educational program is abroad. Sometimes educational examples can also include just doing research for those of you who may be writing a thesis or PhD students, or you're taking an archaeology course. It can be something related to your course of study. And then employment purposes, just really an explanation is good. So if you are, let's say you sell medical equipment and there's going to be a conference, or you have a client in Mexico, then you'd want to document that with a letter from your employer and maybe even a conference program. Next slide, please. Okay. In terms of, I think that the most common question we have is, are there risks involved in traveling abroad? It is nerve-wracking, I think, especially for, I think the initial process of applying for DACA, I think, was scary for some people, and quite understandably. There are certain groups of people, I think Ju's advice about trying to get legal representation is a good idea. I think Krishna's note about the Advance Parole Guide on the E4FC website is also very good. For those of you who don't know of a good legal service provider, there is one good place to look is immigrationlawhelp.org, that lists nonprofit legal agencies that are reputable. But in terms of risks in traveling abroad, I think that there are certain groups of people who should be very careful and who really should talk to an attorney first. Anybody who has been in immigration court before should check in. Anybody who has any kind of criminal issue, even if DACA was approved, should check in. There are some situations where there are some criminal activity that may not impact DACA, but does impact admissibility, basically the ability to get back into the country, and sometimes vice versa. A DUI is extremely difficult for DACA, but not necessarily for other types of immigration purposes. So anybody with a criminal record or any kind of criminal issue, or anybody who has been in immigration court should really check in. The other thing I think you should just realize as a theoretical risk is that immigration reform may happen. It will happen at some point. Obviously, we don't know, and as we get closer to the 2014 election, we wonder. But if there is an immigration program, either something announced by the president like DACA or an actual immigration reform law passed by Congress, it's possible that that law may have priorities, that not necessarily dealing with everybody at the same rate. And what we've seen in the past is that when, in some cases where there has been immigration reform, people who are physically in the United States on the day it was passed are benefited. So there is a small risk in traveling abroad and perhaps not qualifying for something that might pass. Next slide, please. And this question is about whether you need an attorney or a BIA accredited representative to apply for advance parole. There is no rule that you have an attorney work with you, and there are certainly people who have done this on their own. The We Own the Dream website and the E4FC website have some excellent advice. However, it's a big step. Leaving the country after having been undocumented is a big step, and I certainly do think there's a value to having to having an attorney or a BIA accredited representative, meaning somebody working with a nonprofit legal clinic. Just look over your application, just in the and talk to you a little bit about your history, just in the same way that that you did with the legal aid clinic that he went to. Next slide, please. Okay, how long can an applicant travel for? There is no specific limit. A DACA is granted in 2-year increments, and at this point, we don't know, or at least I don't know, what happens if you ask for DACA beyond your, if you ask for advance parole beyond your DACA. So let's say, for example, that you were approved for DACA in October 2012, and your DACA runs through October 2014. If you want to do a semester-long program, can you ask for DACA for advance parole now, and also file a renewal? I don't think that's going to work, and I haven't seen, although we'll have to see what happens. So I think one limit on how long you can travel for is how long your DACA is valid. I don't think you can apply for advance parole to be gone beyond your DACA and into your renewal. Aside from that, I think I have not seen people apply for more than about 9 months, which would be an academic year abroad. I suppose theoretically it could be longer, but I don't think that would really fit into any of the categories. And so I think 1 academic year is probably the maximum that is realistic. Next slide, please. Okay, how long does it take to receive a decision? Well, we know from Drew that 25 days is his experience. We're seeing more like 5 weeks or so. It does vary a bit, but it is pretty quick. I mean, for immigration purposes, when you compare this to other types of travel documents, it's really pretty good. Next slide, please. Okay. What if you need to leave the what if you need to leave the country immediately? There are several ways to try to expedite a travel document. Either you can call, once you have the receipt, you can call the immigration service. You can call the number on uscis.gov and ask for an expedite. If they agree to consider it, they will ask you to fax documents. Don't ask for an expedite unless you have the documents with you to prove it. And they usually don't entertain expedites unless it's within 2 weeks of your absolute need to travel. So if you have a very important event in 4 weeks, they probably will not entertain your request. You can also send in with the advance parole request a cover sheet, maybe a purple or an orange cover sheet to catch their attention, just explaining the need for the expedite if there really is an urgent situation. And if absolutely necessary, you can also try going into your local USCIS office, making an appointment online in a process called InfoPass, and asking for a travel document that day. If you do that, you're taking a chance. It's discretionary whether they will do it, but also you should bring a new I-131 and all of the other documents supporting your application, your photo ID, and so forth, so that if it is approved, they will have everything they need. Okay, next slide, please.
Yeah, actually, Dan, I want to add a little comment.
Sure.
So here in the Bay Area, the local USCIS office has actually received expedited requests for advance parole, when in fact the actual need to travel isn't immediate. So what they've done is they've actually denied it. So locally, they're telling folks that really, if it's not, like you said, if if they really don't need to go to the local USCIS office to request an expedited advance parole decision, that they shouldn't. Otherwise, they will deny it, and you'll have to start all over. So it's better to wait for a decision.
Yeah, if you possibly can, I think that's good advice. Thank you, Krishna. Because if people, unless there's a truly urgent need, immigration officers, I believe, will feel in some ways the same that I do, that a 3 to 5 week turnaround for travel documents is really about as good as it gets in our business. So you will have to have a very strong, well documented reason to ask them to go faster.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. Is advance parole needed to travel domestically, but outside the continental United States? So I think we're talking about Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. And the answer is no. Advance parole is really for leaving the United States and coming back. Okay, next slide. Do you need a new advance parole document each time you travel? Well, and this is a really good opportunity just to say, ask for as much time and as many entries as you need. I think it's great. I was very pleased to hear that you got a few days on either end of his application. That does not always happen. So I would say if you are thinking of traveling, try to see if there's any other reason to travel beyond that, and put them all into one application if you can. The classic example are sports teams. We have seen people apply for advance parole, let's say with a soccer team to go to a game abroad, and then the advance parole document comes back just for that game. When, if you look down the season, there may be a couple games in Europe and then maybe one in Canada. And if you can lump that all together and ask for a multi-entry travel document, it saves time and money and a little bit of nervousness in trying to know if you'll get it the second time and get it in time to be able to travel. So when the advance parole document arrives, it says very clearly what the expiration date is. It says whether it can be used multiple times, and it is okay to go back and forth during the time that the document is valid. All right, next slide, please. Okay, will a re-entry under advance parole count as a lawful entry into the United States? This is a big one, and I bet there are going to be some questions about this. This is a very important point. In general, now forget about DACA for a minute, just think about general immigration. For applying for a green card, and one common situation for DACA students is marriage to a U.S. citizen. If you get married to a U.S. citizen, you are excused for working without authorization, you're excused for being in the United States without authorization. However, you are not excused, and there are always exceptions, but in general, you are not excused for entering without authorization. So in the case where you have a DACA student who entered the United States without authorization, either across the Mexican border or from a cargo ship or across the Canadian border, that person in general would not be able to apply for a green card even if he or she married a U.S. citizen. Leaving and re-entering under advance parole seems to cure that, because then there is an entry, and that parole entry counts for that purpose. Now, if you were one of the questions that came up in the webinar last week was, is it okay to just put down as your reason for applying for advance parole that you want to be able to adjust your status and get a green card? I don't think that would work. I think you really have to stick with the reasons that are in the advance parole. But if you do happen to travel for one of the appropriate reasons, educational purposes, work purposes, humanitarian purposes, then I think you may, depending on your immigration situation, put yourself in an advantageous situation for a future green card application. There are many, many, many caveats and permutations and hypotheticals here, so I encourage you to talk to somebody. There is some good information in the travel guide on e4fc.org and also the Beyond DACA guide that talks about different common green card options for DACA students. But in general, the Immigration Service has agreed that leaving with advance parole from DACA does not trigger the 3 or 10-year bar. These are penalties that come up from having been in the United States without documentation, and it's very possible that returning on advance parole may set up a future green card application. Again, I have to sound like a lawyer. It's complicated. Talk to somebody, but it's certainly worth looking into. Next slide, please. Okay, what will you receive if the advance parole request is approved? You will receive an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that says advance parole, that has and that has validity dates on it, and that is the document that's used to re-enter the U.S. That's what you show at the airport when you come back along with your passport. Okay, next slide.
Great. So we have arrived to the Q&A section of our presentation. So again, we've been keeping track of the questions that have been coming in from the attendees. You can still ask any question that you all like under the tab that says questions. But just to highlight a few, so the first question is actually for Ju. I guess someone couldn't hear how long you were granted your advance parole for. So can you just say that again?
Yes. I asked for about 20 days or so. I actually do not have a document with me, so I cannot tell you exact request time or date or whatnot, but I asked around like 20 days to the to USCIS, but the USCIS gave me about 23 days. So it gave me about 2 or 3 more days to extra room to stay more in South Korea if I wanted to.
Okay, great. So the next question is for Dan. So someone wants to know if their DACA expires in early December and they would like to travel during Christmas, New Year's, would it be better to apply for their DACA renewal first or advance parole, or can I apply for them at the same time?
Well, it's a really good question, and because this is the first cycle of DACA renewals that we're seeing, I'll obviously have more experience with this at the end of the year. But as a practical matter, what I would do is, if the travel is going to be after the DACA expires, so let's say DACA expires December 15th and the person wants to travel over Christmas, then I would do the renewal as early as possible, and we are very much hoping that we will have all the renewal forms very, very soon, and applications can be filed up to 150 days in advance. So I would file early, get the DACA approved, and then file immediately for advance parole for Christmas. If the first grant of DACA expires after the travel, so let's say the person wants to travel from December 20th to December 30th, and DACA expires December 31st, then I would just go ahead and apply for advance parole now, or as soon as possible, and have that ready to travel, as long as you're coming back before the DACA is granted.
Okay. Someone else is asking about the fee waivers. They're asking if there are any fee waivers for the $360 fee that's required.
The fee, it's a good question. I have not seen somebody ask for a fee waiver, because I think in most cases people are just don't want to take the chance because the travel is time sensitive. Asking for a fee waiver involves a decision, and if the decision comes out negative, then the application gets returned. It was pretty clear it was very clear in the first round of DACA that that the I-821D, the DACA form, and the work card, there is no fee waiver. I think that's being reconsidered a little bit, and we'll find out more for the renewal. But for advance parole, there is technically a fee waiver. I think if there's any possible way to pay it, I think I would, just because, you know, by the time something gets through the lockbox and gets through the mail room, and then a decision is made about the fee waiver, and then you find out, it's taken time, and I have not seen, because of that, I've seen very few, if any, fee waivers requested and none approved. So it makes me nervous to try it.
Okay. So someone wants to know, for DACA recipients who have left the country with advance parole, is there anything they can do to come back without advance parole? So people who have left without advance parole.
That is extremely difficult. I think the only thing to do would be to try. I mean, if somebody's left and has lost their advance parole, that's one thing. But if somebody left without advance parole during DACA, I think they should. The options are really very limited. You can't apply for advance parole from outside the country. I think the only possibility would probably be something called humanitarian parole, which is a more difficult option. So I think that person should really talk to a legal aid group or an attorney.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
And so what about so someone is asking if they can apply for advance parole more than once for different purposes. So they're asking, can they apply for an educational and a humanitarian purpose under the same request?
Yeah, I think you can, and we've seen a few people do this. You know, the word, it's certainly worth asking. So I would always ask for as much as you can get. Ask for a little time on either end, as due God. I would ask for it up front, and ask for different purposes. I think that's fine, as long as they're both well documented. The worst case scenario is that the Immigration Service just grants the first one, and then you have to apply again. But if it's approved, then we've saved money and time. I think it may be less likely to approve if the two events are far apart. So if you're applying for, you know, to visit a sick relative in October, and then you want to go on a work trip in December, they might not be as happy about that. But it's certainly worth asking.
Great. Next question. Does the humanitarian purpose only cover immediate relatives, or would visiting a sick aunt and uncle also be a reason to be approved for advance parole?
The rules, there is no specific rule about who's a close enough relative. I would say I would certainly try an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, and then I think, you know, in some cultures certainly there are people who are more distant, you know, second, third cousins who are really very close to you. If that's the case, you can try. But certainly not an uncle, I would definitely try.
Okay. I think someone is asking about their criminal. So how does my criminal record affect my ability to get advance parole? Yeah.
I don't think it's going to affect the ability to gain advance parole, because the criminal record was disclosed with DACA. I think the issue really is being readmitted. There are very specific rules on what kinds of criminal activity makes someone inadmissible, and it's the subject of day-long immigration conferences. It's very complicated. The DACA rules are actually relatively straightforward about a significant misdemeanor and a DUI and so forth. So what I would do is certainly go ahead and apply for advance parole. There's just to get that process moving. But then before leaving with the advance parole, I would definitely speak with an attorney, show your court dockets, and decide and get an evaluation about whether the criminal activity counts as what's called a ground of inadmissibility, basically something that would stop you from getting into the country.
Great. And I think this next one is actually for Jew. So, Jew, someone is asking if you said that the documents that you submitted for your advance parole request were scanned, or were they original or certified copies?
Yeah, so it was original copies from South Korea, and they just scanned it over through email. And so we did that because it was time sensitive, and also we wanted to reduce costs as much as possible. So we did that on the route, and I think after I got a scanned copy, I have to translate Korean to English, and then I got help from a translator, and then I got a certified translate a document as well with the signatures of translator, and I submitted those documents along with advance parole.
Great. So next question. So this is a common question too for us. So someone wants to know, in addition to receiving advance parole, um, do they also need a passport and a visa to travel outside?
You don't need a visa to travel outside the U.S. It is. I think there are two things to think about in terms of the passport. One is being able to get into the country that you're going to, and you just have to check the rules. If you want to travel to Mexico, your advance parole document is only a document for coming back to the United States, so you'll need something to get into Mexico, and often that is a passport. For coming back to the United States, you generally do need a travel document, so a passport would be the most common. There are passport waivers, but I would try, if at all possible, to get an updated passport for international travel, both to be able to get into the country you're going to, and also to be able to get back to the United States.
Great.
Any other thoughts on that, since you've been fielding those questions also?
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's the same answer that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So the next question is, how do advance parole requests get processed in cases where there is a sudden death? What if a person dies and gets buried while the request is getting approved? Does this matter? What if my parent already passed away and is buried? Can we use advance parole to visit the grave?
Okay, there are a few different questions there, and unfortunately, in the immigration world, we have all seen cases where people just weren't able to get a travel document in time to see a family member before he or she passed away, or to get to a funeral. It's unfortunate, but it's true. I think some of the advice that we talked about earlier, and trying to give enough documentation with the original application, and going to a local office if there really is an urgent situation. I think the last part of that question is, does it count as a humanitarian situation to visit the grave of someone who passed away previously? And I certainly think that sounds like a humanitarian situation. I would probably try to include, maybe if there will be a small service while you're there, maybe the family could organize one. That might be an extra benefit, and maybe the pastor could ask. I think the challenge with that from an immigration point of view is that unless there's an event, there's no specific day to grant the request. But But I certainly think it's worth asking and try to try to make sure you connect the dots, document your relationship to the person who passed away, document that that person did pass away, where the grave is, and if there is any kind of service or family gathering at that point, or if a priest or somebody else can provide a short letter saying that when you're there they will hold some kind of service that can only help. You know, there is a certain amount of discretion that's involved in all advance parole requests for any case type. In general, we have seen the Immigration Service be relatively, I mean, they've done a good job, I think, with advance parole. They have been very reasonable in our opinion. I think the biggest problems we've seen are either people who don't ask for enough time to be able to get back, they have a flight canceled or get a stomach bug and can't travel, and then their advance parole expires, or where they don't send enough documentation ahead of time so that they get a request for evidence in the mail, and then by the time the advance parole is finally approved, it's too late for the trip. Okay.
Great. So next question is someone wants to know, so they graduated from a 4-year institution already, and they're asking if it's possible to enroll in school for the sole purpose of going abroad through their study abroad program. Do you think that will affect the advance parole request decision?
Well, it's a good question. I think if it sounds as if you're talking about enrolling in school in the U.S., even though, and I think that would be fine if you are continuing your studies and the study abroad program relates to that. It should work. I've said a few times, connect the dots. I think you should do it. I think you should get a letter from a professor or an advisor or somebody at the school with the new program explaining why the travel makes sense and fits into the program, and then also have the documentation from the study abroad program. I can't say that I've seen that fact pattern, so I can't tell you that it's worked for other people, but I certainly think it makes sense. It does not have to be during your bachelor's degree.
Great. So this next question is for Ju. So Ju, someone wants to know if you bought your plane tickets before you actually received a decision on your advance parole request.
So even before I answer the question, I want to address about the documentation. Actually, I thought about it for a moment for examination for my grandmother's documentation. When I received the original copies from them, it was over 30 pages. So I had a question about whether I should submit all of them and translate all 30 pages and you know, submit it or not, because I know that it's going to take a very long time to gather and translate all those 30 documents. So I asked a couple of people, and at the end, I decided to just cut down to 2 pages. One page is basically her medical prescriptions and a little bit more details when she took the description and things like that, and how long she's been in hospital. And then the other page, the second page, is basically a doctor's notes saying that, describing her condition, and at the end, the doctor had the signature at the bottom. So yeah, I had 30 pages of copies to 2 pages. So I think that, smaller the better, I think, but I definitely want to suggest you to contact the lawyers or seek advice from different people about that. And in terms to answer your question, yes, I did. I actually purchased the ticket prior to getting approved advance parole. Um, but I was just to make sure that the plane ticket that I bought was refundable. I will need to make sure that I will need to fly in certain time and specific date, and I want to make sure I have that reserved. But at the same time, if the advance parole were to be rejected, I was planning to contact the airline and refund my booking flight.
Hmm.
And Krishna and Drew, I think that's a very good point about spending money. We've as I said, we've been very impressed with USCIS in granting advance parole. I think that they've been very reasonable, and it's been really, I think the program in general has worked pretty well. But you really can't be sure you have advance parole until you actually have it in your hand. These things can get lost in the mail. They can be produced with the wrong name on it, or the wrong photo on it, or the wrong dates on it. So as much as I want to see everybody able to travel, I think it's best not to put down a deposit for a study abroad program or buy a ticket until, if at all possible, until you actually have that document in your hand.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Jew and Dan. The next question is, do I have to travel via plane, or can I also travel through car?
Oh, a car will be fine. I think that the advance parole document lets you request admission to the United States, however you come back, whether it's boat, plane, car, at any border patrol stop, you can show the advance parole document.
Hmm. Great. And another common question that we also receive is, are there any problems with traveling to Cuba? Are there any risks, or can I even travel to that country?
That's a good question. There are, if you look at the American, the United States doesn't have a formal embassy in Cuba, but there is the U.S. interest section, and that has some good advice on traveling to Cuba. I think that question is a little complicated. I would, at this point, unless there's a very strong reason to go, I would probably wait. I think there's less. I think it's less likely to be granted, and I also think there's less support there if there is any kind of issue. I personally would love to go to Cuba, and I think, and I'd like to see people do it, but I think that there are some issues, unfortunately, with traveling there right now.
Hmm. Right. So, next question: what would happen if a DACA recipient falsified a purpose for traveling and was found to have committed fraud?
Well, fraud in any kind of immigration fraud can be an issue for renewals, and it can also be an issue in any kind of future immigration proceeding. I, I think there are waivers for, if it really is fraud or what's called material misrepresentation, there can be waivers available, basically ways to be excused. I think someone who has been caught falsifying information on a DACA or a related application really needs to speak to an immigration professional and see. I'd want to look at exactly to see exactly what was said in writing and whether it was absolutely clear that it fits the legal definition of a material misrepresentation, and then, if necessary, try to look into some waiver options for future applications. It is a complicated situation.
Hmm. Great. Next question is for Jew. So, Jew, someone wants to know. So they said that you mentioned having a place where you're going to be documenting your experience. So they want to know the website or what you're actually doing on that website.
Absolutely. So it's not, we are documenting the experience as we speak, and I'm planning to post a lot of pictures and short videos, and continue to share my experience about Advance Parole and DACA related stuff. So please feel free to visit joinjuhong.com. It's joinjuhong.com, and you will see there's some blogs already posted, and there's some trailer posted in the documentary section, and in upcoming days and weeks, even after I come back to the U.S., I'll continue to write blogs and continue to write about and my journey, and post short videos, and hopefully at the end of this year, post the documentary.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Next question, would getting a short-term job overseas qualify as an employment purpose? How about working with a charity? So I think that's for you, Dan.
I don't. There are so many permutations of what reasons people would use, and it's possible that would work. I don't think that's what was intended. I think what was intended is for somebody working in the United States to be able to go abroad for that job. So working abroad, I don't think would work. Although there's certainly no risk in trying except the filing fee. But I think the intention is that the work is supporting something that's being done here. Working for a charity, if possible, I would try to tie that into someone's work. For example, if a medical student wants to go and do relief work or medical relief work, that would make sense. If the work for a charity is really unrelated to your school or your work, then it doesn't really fit into one of the categories very nicely. Immigration is all about categories. You may have figured that out. So I would try as hard as I can to relate it back to education, employment, or some kind of humanitarian purpose that's related to someone you know. Otherwise, it's worth trying, but I think it's certainly not guaranteed because it's not part of it's not one of the categories that was really intended for travel.
Okay. So next question, if someone has a deportation order terminated, do you recommend applying for advance parole after the deportation order is terminated?
Yes. I think, again, I think anybody who's been in immigration court should probably talk to a legal service professional just before traveling, just to make sure that it was terminated. But if the deportation order was terminated, the DACA was granted, then I think advance parole should be fine. Just have somebody look at the documents and make sure that's really what it is.
Would my sick relative have to be dying in order for me to be considered, or would the fact that they have been chronically sick fall under a humanitarian purpose?
Chronically sick, I think, absolutely counts. It does not have to be a dying relative. And the degree of it should be a significant illness, but it could even be an operation from which the person is expected to recover fully. So, but I think it should be something significant, but it does not have to be a dying relative.
Another question, is there a limit to how many times we can apply for advance parole?
No, there really isn't. I think it's just a question of how many good reasons do you have.
Great. Running through these rather quickly. If I applied for advance parole for an employment reason and was recently fired from the company that employs me, should I go to the USCIS office in person to notify them?
It's really not necessary. If you have an advance parole document that you don't need anymore, then you just don't use it. But you don't need to notify anybody.
Hmm. Oh, so this is a good one. Would traveling with advance parole reset our length of resident in the US? Would our continuous presence be compromised or changed after we leave?
Continuous presence is a concept that's very important for DACA, and traveling just on advanced parole during the time that you're allowed to travel should not affect your continuous presence.
Someone else wants to know if the advance parole decision, if it gets denied, for example, will it affect the renewal for DACA?
No. Um, uh, Basically, there, if an advance parole request gets denied, it just goes into the file. It will not hurt any future application. The only, it, if it isn't a strong case, it's a waste of money. But the only issue kind of goes back to the question earlier of whether something untrue was said. If it's denied because they feel as if something is untrue or because something doesn't match with what was on the original DACA application, that can be a red flag for renewal. But otherwise, if it's just denied on a discretionary basis, they felt as if having just for example, you apply because your second or third cousin is ill, and they don't feel as if that's a strong enough humanitarian purpose, then that will not affect any future applications.
Hmm. Great. Actually, yeah, really important. So, a few folks are asking about what the process is like when you're actually at a port of inspection. What does that look like? Are they gonna interrogate the person entering? And are there any tips when they're re-entering the United States?
It's a good question, and unfortunately, that's the one part that Jew hasn't been through, so we can't ask him yet. But uh, in general, advance parole documents are treated in secondary inspection. So, when you go, there's usually the regular line at the airport, and then there's a separate area, to often an office where supervisors review things. And so, if you're called out of the regular line and brought into an office, don't worry. That's common. You will be you may end up sitting there for a little while. You may end up sitting in a room where there's some other people who've done some bad things, and that can be awkward, unfortunately. But you, you I think that my best advice when you're in a situation like that is to keep your answers simple. We tell people to try to stick to one sentence. I mean, be polite, uh, answer the questions, but there's no reason to give a lot of information. I would try to keep things as simple as possible. Where did you go? Oh, I was studying abroad in Barcelona. How long were you gone? About 5 months. So what nice one sentence answers. The officers are not shy. They will feel free to ask follow-up questions, but they often just want to hear the basics. And some people, I've seen this happen. Some people, when they get nervous, they start giving long answers, and then certain pieces of those answers lead to follow-up questions, and everything gets more complicated. Um, there are most. It's always possible that a border patrol, a customs and border patrol agent will be rude or grouchy. It happens. But I think in general, in this kind of situation, if you present a valid advance parole document and your passport, you have a nice simple answer about what you've done, you're polite and forthright and tell the truth if you're asked questions, then it should be fine. And knock on wood, I have not heard of anybody being very unpleasantly grilled coming back with advance parole of DACA. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm cautiously optimistic for all of you if you do it.
Great. Um, Going back to people who have been able to re-enter the United States after traveling abroad with advance parole, someone wants to know, are there any cases of people who have been able to adjust their status after doing that?
Um, Yes, not too many because it's all very new, but it has happened in different parts of the country, and so I would say if you do return on DACA and you do have a path to a green card, it's definitely worth talking to somebody about trying that. And if you're married to a U.S. citizen and all the other parts of the application look good, it may be your opportunity to apply for a green card.
Okay. And a few people want to know what would happen if, for example, their flight gets canceled while they're trying to return, or something else happens that doesn't allow them to come within the allotted time.
Well, I guess I'm going to give a little bit of an annoying answer at first, which is try to avoid that. If your program, let's say you're doing a study abroad and the program ends on October 1st, try to ask through October 10th just to give yourself some time because things do happen. Sometimes personal things happen. You meet somebody there who becomes a good friend, and you want to spend a few days traveling at the end, or plane gets delayed, or you get sick, or something like that. So try as hard as you can to avoid that, and try to book your ticket at least several days before your DACA expires. Um, if you really do get stuck, though, if you lose your advance parole and it's difficult. I think the best thing to do at that point would probably be to go to the nearest American consulate and ask for a transportation letter to get back into the U.S. Or perhaps apply for humanitarian parole. But it's difficult, and you may be stuck for a while getting a decision, and it's discretionary. So, if this has already happened to somebody, please, contact me or somebody else, and we'll try to help. But the best thing to do is just to try as hard as you can to avoid that.
Great. Next question. Has there been any cases of anyone being denied reentry?
I have not heard of anybody being denied reentry, but I have talked to people who and suggested that they not apply for advance parole with, as I said, with some kind of criminal issue or a fraud issue or something in their background that makes it risky for them to try. So I think DACA students in general seem to be getting pretty good advice, and but if I absolutely have not seen anybody or heard of anybody being denied reentry if there were no red flags from the beginning. I know it's a little scary, but in general, I think it's a relatively surprisingly safe process. I mean, I think all of us probably, in May of 2012, never really expected things to have moved as fast as they did, and DACA has been a big step forward, and advance parole seems to be working pretty well.
So someone wants to know, they have a pretty big family, so it's 4 sisters, and they want to know if they each have to submit a separate advance parole request, or can they all be included under the same one?
Oh no, each person has to apply for advance parole separately, unfortunately. So that's for filing fees. And if there's no hurry, it might be an opportunity to try a fee waiver. But yeah, one application per person.
And before I go on, so I don't think I mentioned, so it's 8 o'clock already. We said we were gonna end our webinar originally at 8, but I think Dan and Ju were grateful enough to stay for a few extra minutes. So I'm gonna go through as many questions as I can in the next 10 or 15 minutes for those who want to stay. Let's see. Someone wants to know if they can file a request online, or is it a paper version?
It is online. I tend to I like the paper version. I think Um, I think at some point in the next year or two, the immigration service is going. The online filings are going to be even better. Their technology is not great, and so I, we still do paper filings for everything in our office, almost everything.
Right. This next one is actually for Jew. So, Jew, someone wants to know what if you can describe the process. You know, when you got to the airport, were you nervous at all of being able to fly? Did they question you? And also, when you landed in South Korea, did you run into any problems, or what was that process like? Jew. I think Jew took a little break. We'll get back to him if he comes back. Let's see. Uh, oh, so someone wants to know if they're denied their advance parole request. Is it possible to get reimbursed for the money they spent on the application fee?
No, that's the risk. I think if you apply and you're denied, you have lost the money.
Um, I guess someone didn't hear you, but just to ask the question again, let's say an immigration reform will happen while I'm abroad. Will that potentially leave me out of being able to benefit for that?
Um, not necessarily, and obviously we don't. You know, there are so many unknowns here. We don't know when immigration reform will happen, and we don't know exactly what it will look like. But it is it is possible that I think just looking back on previous immigration reforms and other programs, it's possible that there may be priorities in immigration reform. I think at this point it looks possible that DACA students may have a priority in if there is some kind of program that covers 12 million people, it will have to be prioritized, and it's possible that DACA students who are in the United States at the time the law passed, may have higher priorities. So that is I think that is a small risk. In the end, I don't think it's a huge risk. I was more concerned about this last year when I thought there was a possibility that immigration reform might be coming soon. But it is common in immigration laws to say people who are here on the day it's passed get some kind of special benefit, and that could happen again, and it's just a reality of. And so I have been a little less encouraging of people to do a year-long program abroad, even though. But if it's something they've always dreamed of doing, and it's a great opportunity, and they know they'll have the advance parole to come back and resume DACA, I think they'll just have to balance that, and it's certainly not a bad decision to go.
Great. Actually, yeah, I think we're getting to the last few questions. So the first one is for someone who travels abroad, um, are they able to then go to a different country once they're abroad, or do they have to mention it in the first advance or in the advance parole request?
You know, this is a really interesting question. The Because we have a lot of variations on this. You know, if I get advance parole to go I'm taking an archaeology course. I get advance parole to go do archaeology research in Mexico. Can I also go visit friends in El Salvador, or go to London and see Big Ben? Um, you know, I don't. I think as long as the original purpose is valid, and as long as you're within the validity period of the advance parole, I really don't think there's a risk there. It's not what's intended, and I think if you asked an immigration officer, they would probably say don't do it. But on the other hand, if you have enough time on your advance parole, it's probably okay. There's a hypothetical risk that you're coming back in, that the immigration officer might see that you're coming from a different country and wonder, but the advance parole request itself, the advance parole document does not list any particular country that you're authorized to go to, and the Border Patrol officer would not have any way of knowing why advance parole was granted in the first place. So I guess I'm giving a little bit of a longer answer that's maybe not quite as conclusive, but there is a theoretical risk, but I think the risk is low. The main point is that you are traveling for the reason that was given in the advance parole document.
Right. Next question is about someone receiving a request for evidence when they're submitting a advance parole request. They want to know how long they have to give a response.
Usually it's 30 days. Sometimes it could even be longer. But I would think in general with advance parole, you have a real reason you want to travel, so you would want to put everything together quickly. And usually 30 days should be enough time to answer any questions that they have.
Right. Next question is for someone wants to know if adjusting status after they re-enter the country only applies to marriage to U.S. citizens.
It's the most common because marriage to a U.S. citizen excuses some of the other issues that DACA students sometimes have. Marriage to a U.S. citizen excuses having worked without authorization and also having been in the unlawful presence, which is basically being in the United States for 6 months or a year without status as an adult. So there could be situations where somebody could adjust status another way, but marriage to a U.S. citizen is really the most common. If you're under, I suppose if you're under 21 and you have a parent who's a U.S. citizen, that's the same category. It's called immediate relative and includes children of U.S. citizens and spouses of U.S. citizens, and also parents of adult U.S. citizens, but no DACA student would qualify there.
Great. So the last question is about so they want to know if USCIS actually decides the dates that you're allowed to travel for, or do you get to choose them?
They decide, but you can certainly ask. It sounds as if Jew was lucky and that he asked for some and they gave him more, and that's great. But in general, you ask for the time you want, and you explain the dates of that you'll be gone. And again, just as an example, if it's a study abroad program that goes till December 20th, I would say that you want, I would on everything I would list up till December 30th just to give yourself some extra time.
Great, thank you. So I think that concludes our webinar. Before everyone leaves, I just want to say there were a lot of questions that were really case-specific questions about wanting to know if their advance parole request will be approved. Dan, is there any way for them to contact you? They could surely contact us, but is there any way for them to reach out to you or your firm?
Sure, and we have, I know there's a lot of great resources on your website, Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
Our website is curranberger.com, and we have a, I think it's, oh, I should look, but it's right at the top that there are some different categories, and one of them is on DACA and DREAM Act, and you can feel free to just submit an inquiry right through our website. Also, just do remember that that immigrationlawhelp.org has good referrals to local organizations, and Krishna's website and also weownthedream.org have really excellent materials.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you, Ju Hong, who had to leave early. I just received a message. But again, this webinar is recorded, and it will be on our E4FC website. for people to download in a few weeks. So you can go to www.e4fc.org and again check out our guide, which has a lot more information than this webinar was able to present on. So check that out, and thank you all so much for attending. And thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Krishna. Have a good night.
All right, have a good night, everyone.